After my former boyfriend's gambling addiction destroyed our relationship, I got the perfect payback by completely transforming myself and finding a man who truly loves me. Hey everyone, my name is Chloe, and breaking up with Tyler was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. At the time, it felt like the only choice I had, but looking back now, I can see how wrong I was about everything. We had been together for 5 years and engaged for the last 8 months. On paper, everything was absolutely perfect. Tyler was this incredible man who treated me like I was the most important person in the world. He never forgot a single anniversary, always remembered to put the toilet seat down, and brought me hot chocolate in bed every Sunday morning without me even having to ask. He was exactly the kind of man that every girl says she wants until she actually gets him. But here's the thing that nobody ever tells you about seemingly perfect relationships. They can start to feel like a prison when everyone around you appears to be living it up. My entire friend group had basically imploded over the past year, and their situations were making me question everything about my own life. Kara had gotten divorced from her husband after catching him cheating with his secretary, which was just classic midlife crisis bullshit. Sarah had broken up with her long-term boyfriend because she claimed she felt like she was settling for something mediocre. And Vanessa had been single for 2 years straight, apparently living her absolute best life according to her Instagram posts. So there I was at 28 years old, engaged to this wonderful man who loved me unconditionally, and I felt like I was missing out on everything exciting that life had to offer. Every single weekend, my girlfriends would go out to the newest clubs downtown and post these amazing photos of themselves dancing, laughing, and meeting interesting new guys. Meanwhile, I would be at home with Tyler, watching Netflix and eating Chinese takeout from the same 3 restaurants we always ordered from. Don't get me wrong, I genuinely loved our quiet nights together. There was something comforting about our routine, about knowing that Tyler would be there with his arm around me while we binge-watched whatever series we were currently obsessed with. But there was this persistent, nagging voice in the back of my head that kept asking if this was really all there was to life. Was I supposed to be satisfied with the same predictable pattern for the next 50 years? The final straw came on a Friday night in April that I'll never forget. The girls were planning to go to this brand new rooftop bar that had just opened downtown. It was supposed to be this trendy place with craft cocktails and a live band. Exactly the kind of scene I'd been craving. I really wanted to go with them. I hadn't been out dancing in months, maybe even close to a year at that point. I decided to get dressed up for the occasion and put on my favorite red dress, the one that always made me feel sexy and confident whenever I wore it. I spent extra time doing my makeup, making sure everything looked perfect, and styling my hair just the way I liked it. I felt good about myself for the first time in weeks, like I was reconnecting with the version of myself that existed before I became half of a couple. Tyler was in the living room playing some video game when I finally emerged from the bedroom, fully ready to go out. He looked up at me from the couch and gave me that sweet smile he always got whenever he thought I looked particularly good. But then his expression completely changed when he realized that I was actually dressed to go somewhere without him. The smile faded from his face, and I could see the confusion and concern creeping in. He asked me where I was going, and I explained about the rooftop bar and how I wanted to spend some time with my girlfriends. His smile disappeared entirely, and he got that serious look on his face, the one he always got when he was about to say something that he knew I wouldn't want to hear. He reminded me that we were engaged now, and that going out to clubs wasn't really appropriate behavior for someone in a committed relationship. He specifically mentioned that going out dressed like that sent the wrong message to other people. He said all of this in his characteristically calm, reasonable way that somehow made me feel like a child being scolded by a disappointed parent. He wasn't yelling at me or being overtly controlling about it. He was simply stating what he believed was obvious, that engaged women don't go clubbing with their single friends, especially not dressed in ways that might attract attention from other men. In his mind, he was just being logical and protecting our relationship from unnecessary complications. And that's when something deep inside me just completely snapped. Here I was, already feeling suffocated and trapped by the predictability of our life together. And he was basically confirming that my fun, carefree days were officially over forever. I looked at him sitting there in his comfortable sweatpants and old t-shirt, controller still in his hands, and I felt this overwhelming wave of resentment wash over me. Was this really what the rest of my life was going to look like? Friday nights spent on the couch watching him play video games while my friends were out actually living their lives and having real adventures? I told him that I was going anyway, and he could just deal with it. That's when we got into this massive fight that escalated way beyond anything either of us had expected. He kept insisting that he wasn't trying to control me, that he just thought going out like this sent the wrong message about our relationship and what kind of woman I was. Meanwhile, I kept telling him that I felt like I was slowly dying inside from pure boredom, that our life had become so predictable and routine that I could barely stand it anymore. The argument got uglier and uglier as we both dug in our heels. Neither of us was willing to back down or see the other person's perspective. The tension that had been building up inside me for months finally exploded, and I said things that I knew would hurt him deeply. I told him that maybe we wanted completely different things out of life, that maybe I wasn't ready to settle down into this kind of domestic routine, that maybe he was just too predictable and safe for someone like me, and I needed something more exciting and unpredictable in my life. The look on his face when those words came out of my mouth still haunts me sometimes when I'm lying awake at night. It was like I had physically slapped him across the face. He went completely quiet and just stared at me for what felt like an eternity, processing what I had just said to him. I could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes, mixed with something that looked like genuine shock that I could be so cruel. Then he asked me in this quiet, devastated voice if I was seriously breaking up with him over a night out at a club. And honestly, when he put it like that, it sounded absolutely ridiculous even to me. The whole situation seemed so petty and insignificant when he framed it that way. But I was already in too deep to back down now, and my pride wouldn't let me admit that maybe I was being completely unreasonable. I told him that it wasn't really about the club at all. It was about everything else. It was about how I felt like I was missing out on important experiences that other people my age were having. It was about how all my friends were single and having these amazing adventures while I was sitting at home planning a wedding and picking out silverware patterns like some kind of old married lady. I said I needed someone who was more exciting and spontaneous, someone who would keep me on my toes instead of making me feel like I was already settling into middle age at 28. He just sat there and took every word of my rant without fighting back or trying to argue with me. He didn't defend himself or try to convince me that I was wrong about any of it. When I was finally done saying everything I had been holding inside, he quietly asked me if this was really what I wanted, if throwing away 5 years together was worth whatever I thought I was going to find out there. When I said yes, that this was what I wanted, he just nodded slowly and said, "Okay." There was no begging, no pleading, no dramatic declarations of love or promises to change. Just that simple, devastating okay. And that was it. 5 years of building a life together, an engagement, a whole future that we had planned out in detail. And it was all over because I wanted to go dancing with my girlfriends. The crazy part is that I didn't even end up going to the club that night. I was too emotionally drained from the breakup and everything that had just happened between us. Instead, I just sat on my couch eating ice cream straight from the container and wondering what the hell I had just done to my life. Tyler's side of the story. My name is Tyler, and I lost 5 years of my life because I wouldn't let her go clubbing while wearing that dress that barely covered anything important. But here's what I learned about myself during those dark weeks that followed our breakup. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who falls apart completely and becomes a pathetic mess. Yeah, I was hurt by what had happened between us. Yeah, I was angry about the way she had thrown away everything we'd built together over something so trivial. But I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to sit around begging her to come back or stalking her social media accounts like some kind of desperate loser who couldn't accept reality. My dad had always taught me a valuable lesson about relationships and people in general. When someone shows you who they really are, you need to believe them the first time. Chloe had shown me that after 5 years of what I thought was a solid, committed relationship, she was willing to throw it all away for some fantasy about club nights and excitement that she thought she was missing out on. That told me everything I needed to know about her character and what she actually valued in life. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I threw myself into my work harder than I ever had before. I started staying late at the office, volunteering for projects that nobody else wanted to touch, and basically doing anything I could think of to keep my mind occupied and focused on something productive. My boss noticed the extra effort I was putting in and started giving me more responsibility, which meant more money in my paycheck and better opportunities for advancement. With the extra income, I could finally afford that gym membership I'd been putting off for years. I figured that if I was going to be single again, I might as well get myself into the best physical shape of my life. The gym quickly became my therapy and my outlet for all the complicated emotions I was dealing with. Every time I felt angry about the whole situation and the way things had ended between us, I would channel that energy into lifting weights. Every time I started feeling sorry for myself or questioning whether I could have done something differently, I would run it out on the treadmill until my legs felt like jelly. Within 6 months of our breakup, I was in better physical condition than I had been since my college days. I lost about 25 pounds of excess weight and put on some serious muscle mass that people actually started commenting on. But the real transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional. I started reading books again, which was something I had completely stopped doing while I was with Chloe, because she always wanted us to watch television together instead of having quiet time for individual activities. I got back into cooking, which was something I had actually loved doing before our relationship, but had gotten lazy about because it was easier to just order takeout most nights. I also started hanging out with my old friends more regularly. These were guys I had kind of neglected during my relationship with Chloe because she always wanted us to spend our social time with her friends instead of mine. It felt good to reconnect with people who knew me as an individual rather than just as half of a couple. And you know what's really funny about the whole situation? All those things that Chloe had criticized me for not being exciting, unpredictable fun. I started becoming those things naturally, once I wasn't trying so hard to be the perfect boyfriend anymore. It was like I had been suppressing parts of my personality without even realizing it. I took a completely spontaneous weekend trip to Atlantic City with my buddy Connor, something I never would have done while I was with Chloe, because she would have wanted to plan everything out weeks in advance. I started rock climbing at this indoor facility near my apartment, which was thrilling and challenging in ways I hadn't experienced in years. I even learned how to make craft cocktails just because I thought it was cool and interesting, not because I was trying to prove anything to anyone or impress some woman. I was doing all of these things simply because I finally had the time and energy to figure out who Tyler really was as an individual again, rather than who I was as someone's boyfriend. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based purely on what I wanted to do, without having to consider how it would affect someone else's plans or feelings. The dating thing happened gradually and naturally. I wasn't actively looking for anything serious or trying to replace what I had lost with Chloe. But when you're a guy in your early 30s who has his life together, is in good physical shape, and isn't desperate for a relationship, women tend to notice those qualities. I started going out more often and meeting new people through my friends and various social activities. I even decided to try some of those dating apps just to see what was available out there and what the modern dating scene was like. That's actually how I ended up meeting Brooke, who turned out to be pretty special. She was this college student, 24 years old, studying biochemistry and working part-time at this coffee shop that I'd started going to regularly. Brooke was incredibly smart and had this great sense of humor that I found refreshing. What I appreciated most about spending time with her was that she didn't have all the baggage and unrealistic expectations that women my age seem to carry around with them. She wasn't constantly worried about timelines for getting married or having kids, wasn't comparing our relationship to some idealized version she had in her head. We started hanging out casually, just enjoying each other's company without any pressure about where our relationship was heading or what it meant for the future. There was something liberating about being with someone who was just happy to be in the moment rather than constantly planning ahead or worrying about what everyone else was doing. What I realized during this entire period of my life was that Chloe had actually done me a huge favor, even though it definitely didn't feel that way at first. I had gotten way too comfortable in that relationship, maybe even complacent. I had started defining myself entirely through being her boyfriend instead of maintaining my own identity and interests as an individual person. Now I was rediscovering who Tyler was when he wasn't constantly trying to make someone else happy all the time, or living his life according to someone else's expectations and demands. By the time 2 years had passed since our breakup, I barely thought about Chloe anymore, except when something random would remind me of her or our time together. I was genuinely living my life on my own terms, focusing on advancing my career, staying in excellent physical shape, dating casually without pressure, and honestly having more fun than I'd had in years. It turns out that being unpredictable and exciting really isn't that difficult when you're not constantly worried about maintaining someone else's approval. Back to Chloe's perspective. Those first few months after the breakup were exactly what I thought I had wanted all along. The freedom felt absolutely intoxicating in ways I hadn't anticipated. I could go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without having to check in with anyone or worry about what Tyler would think about my choices. It felt like I was finally taking control of my own life again. My girlfriends and I hit every single new bar and club that opened in the city. We would stay out until 3 in the morning on weeknights, not caring about how tired we'd be the next day at work. We slept until noon on weekends, ordered expensive brunch with bottomless mimosas, and spent our afternoons shopping for new outfits to wear out that night. It felt like I was finally living the exciting life I'd been missing out on while I was tied down in a relationship. Kara was going through her whole post-divorce wild phase during this time, so she became the natural ringleader of our group adventures. She had found this new confidence after leaving her cheating husband and was absolutely determined to make up for all the time she felt she had wasted being married. She was the one who always knew about the hottest new places to go and the most exclusive events happening around town. Sarah was riding high from her own breakup and constantly talking about how free and liberated she felt. She kept saying that settling down was something that people did when they had given up on life and stopped believing that anything exciting could happen to them. Her energy was infectious, and she made me feel like I had made the right choice in prioritizing my independence. And Vanessa had been our perpetually single friend for as long as I could remember, so she was just thrilled to finally have all of us back in the dating game with her. She had perfected the art of the single life and was eager to teach us everything she had learned about navigating the modern dating scene. We developed this whole elaborate routine that we followed religiously every weekend. We'd start with pre-drinks at someone's apartment, getting ready together and hyping each other up. Then we'd hit the hottest clubs in town, dance until our feet hurt in our expensive heels, let attractive guys buy us drinks and flirt with us all night long, collect phone numbers from the ones who seemed most promising, and finally stumble into Ubers at closing time, laughing about all the attention we'd gotten. I bought new outfits constantly, always trying to find something that would make me stand out from all the other women competing for the same men's attention. I learned how to do the perfect smoky eye makeup that made me look mysterious and sexy in the dim club lighting. I even got highlights for the first time in years, spending way too much money at an upscale salon to get exactly the right shade. I felt like I was 23 again instead of 28, like I had somehow turned back the clock on my life. But here's the thing that nobody ever tells you about the single life when you're in your late 20s. It gets old incredibly fast, and the novelty wears off sooner than you'd expect. After about 6 months of following the exact same routine every weekend, I started noticing things that really bothered me about this lifestyle I had fought so hard to achieve. Like how absolutely exhausting it was to always be on whenever I went out. I constantly had to be performing, always trying to look perfect and interesting and available, never allowing myself to just relax and be natural. The pressure to maintain this image of the fun, carefree single girl was mentally draining in ways I hadn't anticipated. I also started realizing how expensive this lifestyle really was. I was constantly buying new clothes because I couldn't be seen in the same outfit twice at the popular spots where we hung out. The expensive Ubers home at 3 in the morning were adding up to ridiculous amounts on my credit card statements. The cover charges, the overpriced drinks, the salon appointments to maintain my appearance. It was all costing me more money than I had ever spent when I was in a relationship with Tyler. But the worst part was how lonely I felt walking into my empty apartment at 3 in the morning with mascara smudged under my eyes, knowing that I'd have to do it all over again the next weekend if I wanted to maintain my social life. There was something deeply depressing about the contrast between how exciting the night had seemed when it started and how hollow it felt when it was over. And the men I was meeting, God, the men were either total players who just wanted to hook up with as many women as possible, or these commitment-phobic man-children who were still acting like they were in college even though they were in their 30s. Sure, they'd buy me drinks all night and get my phone number with smooth pickup lines, but then it was all late-night booty call texts and guys who expected me to sleep with them immediately after one mediocre dinner date. Where was the romance, the genuine effort, the basic consideration and respect that I had gotten so used to receiving from Tyler? These men seemed to think that buying me a few cocktails entitled them to whatever they wanted from me, and they had no interest in actually getting to know me as a person. The real wake-up call came when I randomly ran into my old school friend Claire at the grocery store one afternoon. She was about 8 months pregnant and absolutely glowing with happiness. She spent 20 minutes telling me about how excited she and her husband were about becoming parents, describing their nursery plans and upcoming baby shower in detail. As I stood there listening to her talk about this major milestone in her life, I realized that I was now 29 years old and somehow further away from marriage and having children than I had been when I was 23 and single. What exactly was I accomplishing with all this freedom that I had fought so hard to obtain? What did I have to show for the past year of my life besides a collection of meaningless hookups and expensive hangovers? things got even worse when I decided to give serious dating another real try and reconnected with this guy Derek that I had dated briefly before I met Tyler. Derek seemed like everything I thought I had wanted in a man. He was unpredictable, exciting, spontaneous, and completely different from the stable, reliable type of guy that Tyler had been. Derek would text me at midnight asking if I wanted to go on a spontaneous road trip to the Florida Keys, not caring that I had work the next morning. He'd show up at my apartment with concert tickets that he had bought just an hour before showtime, expecting me to drop everything and go with him. He would surprise me with expensive dinners at these trendy restaurants where I couldn't even pronounce half the items on the menu. At first, this kind of spontaneous behavior felt like exactly the type of excitement I had been craving for so long. Finally, I had found a guy who kept me guessing about what would happen next, who brought genuine adventure into my life instead of the predictable routine of Netflix and Chinese takeout every single night. This was what I had thrown away my relationship with Tyler to find. But after a couple of months with Derek, I started seeing the serious downsides of all that unpredictability that had initially seemed so appealing. He would cancel our dates at the last minute because something more interesting or exciting had come up, leaving me dressed up and ready to go with nowhere to be. He would disappear for days at a time without any explanation, then act like I was being clingy and unreasonable when I asked where he had been and why he hadn't bothered to call or text. Derek flirted openly with other women right in front of me, even when we were supposed to be on dates together. When I got upset about this behavior, he would dismiss my concerns and call it harmless fun, saying that I was being insecure and trying to control him just like every other woman he had ever dated. The final straw came when I found out through a mutual friend that he was still sleeping with his ex-girlfriend the entire time we had been seeing each other. When I confronted him about it directly, he had the nerve to tell me that we had never officially agreed to be exclusive, so technically he wasn't doing anything wrong. He said that I was trying to tie him down and restrict his freedom just like every other woman he had ever been involved with. According to Derek, wanting basic honesty and commitment from someone you're dating was just another form of controlling behavior. He made me feel like I was being unreasonable for expecting him to treat our relationship with any kind of respect or consideration. 2 months after our relationship ended, I found out through our mutual friends that Derek had gotten back together with his ex-girlfriend officially, and they were already talking seriously about moving in together. Apparently, when he found the right woman, he was perfectly capable of commitment and exclusivity. I just wasn't that woman. So there I was at 29 years old, watching all of my friends slowly start settling down again and finding meaningful relationships, while I was right back to square one. I had spent over a year chasing this fantasy of excitement and adventure, and all I had to show for it was a series of disappointing experiences with men who didn't value me the way Tyler had. The restaurant encounter. Tyler's perspective. Brooke looked absolutely incredible that night when we went out to dinner. She had chosen this simple black dress that somehow managed to be both classy and sexy at the same time, striking the perfect balance that so many women struggle to achieve. She had also done something different with her hair that made her look even younger than her 24 years, giving her this effortless beauty that I found genuinely captivating. We got seated at this corner table that had a great view of the entire restaurant, and I was feeling pretty good about life in general. Here I was with this beautiful, intelligent woman who actually laughed at my jokes instead of just politely smiling. She didn't spend the entire dinner checking her phone or complaining about drama with her friends, like so many women seem to do on dates these days. We were maybe halfway through our appetizer, just enjoying each other's company and having a genuine conversation, when Brooke suddenly got this weird, uncomfortable look on her face. She asked me if I knew the woman who was sitting alone at the bar area. I followed her gaze and looked over in that direction. There she was, Chloe, sitting by herself at the bar, nursing what looked like a glass of wine and picking half-heartedly at some kind of salad. I told Brooke honestly that yes, that was my ex-fiancé from a couple of years ago. Brooke just nodded and mentioned that the woman had been looking at us frequently throughout the evening, then quickly turning away whenever Brooke made eye contact with her. Chloe looked older somehow, which sounds ridiculous since it had only been 2 years since our breakup, but there was something fundamentally different about her appearance and demeanor. Maybe it was the way she was sitting, kind of slumped over with her shoulders hunched, or the fact that she was dining alone on a Saturday night when she used to be so social and always surrounded by her friends. About 10 minutes had passed when Chloe suddenly appeared at our table out of nowhere. I don't know how long she had been working up the courage to come over and approach us, or if she had just made an impulsive decision in the moment. But there she was, looking nervous as hell, and trying desperately to act casual about the whole situation. She said hello, like we had just randomly bumped into each other at the grocery store, instead of this being the first time we had seen each other, since she decided that I wasn't exciting enough for her and threw away our entire relationship. I kept things simple and polite, introducing Brooke without making a big deal out of the situation or creating any unnecessary drama. Brooke was absolutely perfect about the whole encounter. She smiled warmly and said it was nice to meet Chloe, like she genuinely meant it, showing none of the jealousy or insecurity that some women might have displayed in that situation. Her grace and maturity made me appreciate her even more. Chloe tried to make small talk for a few minutes, asking how I was doing and saying that I looked good. All that awkward ex-girlfriend conversation that people feel obligated to have when they don't know what else to say. What struck me most about the interaction was how genuinely uncomfortable and fidgety she seemed throughout the entire exchange. The Chloe I remembered had always been confident and charming in social situations, able to make conversation with anyone she met and put people at ease. But this version of her was nervous and kept glancing back and forth between Brooke and me, like she was trying to figure out exactly what our relationship was and how serious things were between us. She asked if we were celebrating anything special that evening, and when I simply said that we were just enjoying a nice dinner together, she got this expression on her face that I couldn't quite read. There was something in her eyes that looked almost like regret or longing, but I couldn't be sure. The entire interaction lasted maybe 3 minutes before she said she should probably get going and let us enjoy the rest of our evening. She walked away, but then Brooke caught her standing outside the restaurant window, apparently staring at us through the glass, like she was trying to process what she had just witnessed. I didn't think much of the encounter at the time. I figured she was just being naturally curious about my new relationship, which seemed normal enough for an ex-girlfriend. Brooke and I finished our wine, went back to my place, and had an amazing night together. I pretty much forgot about the whole thing and moved on with my evening. That is, until my phone started buzzing incessantly with text messages at 11:30 that night, while Brooke was in my bathroom getting ready for bed. Chloe's desperate attempt at reconciliation. Seeing Tyler with that young, gorgeous girl at our old favorite restaurant hit me like a physical punch to the gut. Brooke, that was her name. And she couldn't have been older than 23. Probably even younger than that. She had this effortless, natural beauty that I used to possess, but was starting to lose as I approached 30. Her skin was flawless, her smile was genuine and bright, and she had that youthful energy that I remembered having once upon a time. The way Tyler looked at her, the way his face lit up when she laughed at something he said, it was exactly how he used to look at me during the early days of our relationship. I could see the genuine affection and attraction in his eyes. The same expression that had made me feel so special and loved for 5 years. But now he was looking at someone else that way, and I was the outsider watching from across the restaurant. That night after I got home, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept replaying the encounter over and over in my head, analyzing every detail of their interaction and torturing myself with questions about their relationship. How long had they been together? Was it serious? Was he falling in love with her the way he had once fallen in love with me? I knew I had to do something. Had to at least try to explain myself and see if there was any chance that he would consider giving us another shot. So around 11:30 that night, I started sending him text messages, pouring out everything that had happened to me since we broke up. I told him about how I had gone back to the whole party scene with my friends, thinking that was what I wanted, but discovering that it got old and meaningless much faster than I had expected. I admitted that I had missed being in a real, committed relationship with someone who actually cared about me as a person, instead of just wanting to hook up and move on to the next woman. I tried to position everything like I had learned from my mistakes and grown as a person during our time apart. I explained that I had figured out what really mattered in life and realized that I had thrown away something precious and irreplaceable. I asked if we could meet up somewhere neutral and just talk, really talk, so I could apologize properly and see if maybe we could work things out between us. When he didn't respond to any of my text messages that night, I knew I needed to do something bigger and more meaningful to get his attention. So I decided to write him a real handwritten letter, the kind that people used to send before everything became digital and impersonal. I poured my heart out on paper, telling him how genuinely sorry I was for everything I had said and done. I wrote about how breaking up with him was without question the stupidest decision I had ever made in my entire life. I blamed my friends for being bad influences who had convinced me that I was missing out on something important, when the truth was that I had actually had everything I needed with him. I explained that I had been young and foolish and hadn't appreciated what we had together until it was too late. I told him that seeing him with that other woman had made me realize that I was still in love with him and probably always would be. Walking to his apartment building with that letter in my hands was absolutely terrifying, but I felt like I had to try everything possible to get him back. I carefully taped the letter to his door and then went home to wait for his response, checking my phone every 5 minutes like some kind of crazy person who had lost all sense of dignity. When he finally texted me back 3 days later, it was just 3 simple words. Need to think. Those 3 words made me happier than I had been in months. He was actually considering my request. He was weighing his options and maybe realizing that what we had together was worth fighting for. I suddenly had hope again for the first time since I had seen him with Brooke at the restaurant. I lived in this weird emotional limbo for what felt like an eternity, constantly oscillating between pure excitement and absolute panic. Every single morning, I would wake up thinking that today might be the day he would finally make his decision and get back to me with an answer. The uncertainty was both thrilling and torturous at the same time. I checked my phone obsessively, probably hundreds of times per day, jumping every time it buzzed with a notification and thinking it might be Tyler with his final answer. I started crafting follow-up messages in my head, asking how his thinking process was going and whether he needed any additional information from me to make his decision. But then I would delete these draft messages before sending them because I didn't want to seem desperate or pushy and ruin whatever chance I might still have. The hope that his response had given me was absolutely intoxicating. I started imagining our reunion in vivid detail, practicing exactly what I would say when he finally called to tell me he wanted to try again. I even found myself looking at wedding dresses online again, browsing through the same websites I had been obsessing over before our breakup. I told myself that Tyler was just being characteristically careful and thoughtful about such an important decision, exactly like he had always been about everything else in his life. I convinced myself that he wanted to make sure we were both emotionally ready this time before jumping back into a relationship that had already failed once. But as the days slowly turned into a full week and then stretched into another week, the anxiety started eating me alive from the inside. What was taking him so long to decide? How much thinking did one person really need to do about whether they wanted to get back together with someone they had loved for 5 years? Was he comparing me to Brooke during this whole decision-making process? Was he weighing the pros and cons of staying with someone young and uncomplicated versus taking a risk on someone who had already hurt him once? Was he even actually thinking about me at all, or had he just said that to get me to leave him alone and stop bothering him? The uncertainty was pure torture. Every day that passed without an answer felt like another nail in the coffin of our potential reconciliation. But I kept telling myself that good things come to those who wait, and that maybe Tyler needed this time to process everything that had happened between us. After 3 full weeks of this emotional roller coaster, I couldn't stand the suspense anymore. I sent him a text message asking if he had had enough time to think things through and if he was ready to give me an answer. When he didn't respond to that message, I texted him again the next day asking if we could at least talk about where his head was at with everything. When he still didn't reply, I decided to call him directly. But when I tried to dial his number, I discovered that he had blocked me completely. My calls wouldn't go through, and my text messages weren't being delivered. In a complete panic, I drove straight to his apartment building, my heart racing and my hands shaking on the steering wheel. But when I tried to go up to his floor, the security guard at the front desk stopped me before I could even get to the elevator. He told me very politely but firmly that Mr. Johnson had specifically requested that I not be allowed in the building anymore under any circumstances. He asked me to leave the property immediately and said that if I came back, they would have to call the police. Standing there in that lobby, being escorted out by security like I was some kind of dangerous stalker, it finally hit me what need to think had really meant all along. Tyler had wanted to prove that he could be unpredictable too, and he had left me hanging in cruel suspense for weeks before cutting me off entirely. The painful truth was that Tyler had genuinely moved on with his life and built something new with someone else. I was just some pathetic reminder of his past that he wanted to disappear from his world forever.